Good evening, everybody, or good day, or good afternoon, depends on where you're at. I am Abe with Mystic Gen Mara, and today I would like to discuss the topic of muscle testing and pendulums. They kind of go hand in hand because you can use them interchangeably as far as a healing practice, but a pendulum, in my opinion, this is my opinion, has a lot more outside of the healing circles uses. But, oops, and I got my notes here so I can keep up. The concept of muscle testing and pendulums are a way to tap into your subconscious mind. It works outside of your conscious, your egoic, or your monkey mind, if you prefer the term. The one that's like always making noise, where you're trying to figure things out quietly and peacefully. A pendulum and muscle testing is a way to bypass that and actually figure out what your body or your mind really needs without all that chitter chatter. My personal preference is I like to use pendulums versus muscle testing. It's just a personal thing, and some people like to use both. Some people only use pendulums, some people only use muscle testing. So basically, I'm going to introduce some of the ideas behind both, and you can make your decision for yourself as to what works and what doesn't. At the very end of the video, or towards the end of the video, whichever you want to, however you want to say it, I will go over my personal pendulum tuning practice, the one that I use when I get a new pendulum. So if you want to hang out for that, that's cool. So starting off, we'll look at muscle testing. By definition, this is the definition, so the words are not going to be as I love definitions because they're always phrased weird. It's a series of tests that locate weakness in a specific muscle that reflects an imbalance within the body. Following your testing, you go into specific massage techniques, acupressure or acupuncture that are then used to fix these imbalances. It also can be called applied kinesiology, and that one is actually it's a movement thing, but there's a bigger practice that's going along with this. And every time I look into it, and I always poke back into muscle testing because it's something that interests me, I find out that it's being used in a broader and broader sense. Originally, you'd only really notice this amongst some Reiki practitioners and acupuncturists, and a few massage therapists were getting into it, but now it's starting to spread where I have heard of chiropractors using it, as well as mainstream doctors are starting to get into using this type of technique. And the biggest reason that they're using it is when we think from here, we're speaking from an egoic mind, a mind that is, this is where what my problem is, this is what my symptoms are, fix it. When you're working with muscle testing and pendulums, you're tapping into the deeper part of who you are, and that's how you can find out, okay, your symptoms are upset stomach, but what's really going on is you have an imbalance in your solar plexus chakra, or there's some energy in your aura that's trying to become released, it's trying to get your attention, it's manifesting as a stomach issue. So when you work with muscle testing and pendulums, you're actually bypassing your conscious mind, me, and finding out, what does your body need? Does it need time to calm down? Does it need some peace? Does it need a more healthy, balanced diet? Things like that. And this is how you can find out with muscle testing. So again, the definition is a little wordy, but basically you're using your body's muscles to answer yes or no questions within your body. It taps your subconscious mind to discover truth versus the nonsense that we tend to spread with our conscious mind sometimes. And a lot of people are starting to tap more into what is it they really need in life, and you're noticing a shift away from high-stress jobs where your bodies are completely racked by the time you're 40, 45, into something that's more calm and at a slower pace, because your body can only function at a high level of adrenaline for so long before it finally is like, we're done, and crash. And people are starting to use a lot of these type of techniques on their own to help bring some more balance into their life. And so that's what this is for. You can perform muscle testing on yourself or for another person. Sometimes asking another person asking for another person is easier, you're less likely to let your own ego get in the way. But with practice, and this is a personal opinion, with practice and meditation, you'll be able to bypass your doubts and basically get the ego mind, that monkey mind, out of the way so you can actually receive the true answers. If you're asking for another person, there's two different ways to go about this. The first is to ask the questions using your own body to do the testing, but you have your intentions set to work with the other person. This is a way to work on distance work, which a lot of us are doing right now because of the last couple of years have been chaos, but it allows you to work from a distance on finding out what a person's situation is, how to deal with the energetic imbalances, and then you can work through the energy process to send that positive energy healing type work to that other person. For me, when you work with this, you really need to have a very clear intention before you start into this work so that you know that you're doing this for the other person. This is not you, it's them. And in some cases, you can actually name yourself, I do this work in the name of. That way you can bring more of an alignment with that other person. And it's, in my mind, you have to have a way of spiritual connection or a mental connection. That's the reason you would rename yourself, or I'm doing the work in the name of, for that other person. It's just a way to distance your ego, your body, from what you're trying to do. But you can do however it works for you as far as that goes. The other way to work with another person is to have them hold a specific position and using their body ask the questions and perform the tests. And we'll go over that here in a second. So to discover the source of the concern and then lead to a solution. The muscle testing gives you the answer to the first part, which is to discover the source. What's going on, what needs to be fixed, what's out of balance. And the possible solution you can also ask once you get where it's at, you can ask yes or no questions and get the solution through that, like what's going to work and what's not going to work. As a reminder, you always want to ask your questions with pendulums and muscle testing in this pattern of yes or no, or true or false. You always want to hold those two different frameworks when you're asking these questions. A pendulum and muscle testing cannot give you a wordy answer. It is a yes or a no. And this is where you have to be really flexible when you're working with them. Have your set base questions and be able to flow into what are your next steps and just kind of go with the flow like that. And that taps into a lot of your intention work as well as your working with this. So when you first start out, and if you're working with a client, this is a good way to always just start your sessions, is you want to have a calm mind. If you're working with a client, you want to do simple breath work, just slow, deep breathing, bringing your attention into your abdomen so that it gets you out of your mind and it brings you into a more calm state. Breathe deeply with your belly especially. And if you are by yourself, you can do the same breathing techniques, or you can meditate for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. It's just a way to help get your consciousness into a more calm state, which allows your subconscious mind to step up and say, hey, I'm here, let's do this. And once you have gotten yourself into a more calm state, you want to bring your attention to your heart chakra area or to your sacral, which is around your belly button area. Because your gut instinct is going to guide this as well as your heart, which taps into divine love. So you want to work from one of those two areas. You do not want to work in your mental state because that's going to give you a different answer. Because your mind's going to analyze from a clinical standpoint, which is not what you're doing. You're trying to find out what is the source of the issue, not as what is the result. And so once you get tapped into that calmer state, then you can start asking your body, and this is just a way to practice with it, by asking, what is the sign for yes? And I'll go through some of the techniques and a little bit of how I've worked with them. But once you start to notice the movement of what the yes sign is, then move on to what is no, so that you can get the yes and no balance. Once you figure out your yes and no's, or your true and falses, depending, and my experience is your yes is going to equal your truth, your no's are going to equal your false, so it's whichever one you want to work with. I personally prefer yes and no's, but these are the main options that you can work with as far as the positive, negative responses. So once you figure out your yeses and your nos, then you can move on to what's the next steps. And so like I said, I'm just going to go over some basic stuff here, but there are courses you can find that specifically teach muscle testing. They're not like college courses or certification courses, but they can help enhance. If you already have a healing practice, they can enhance it, because you can actually start to work into deeper and deeper levels of what's going on within a person's body, mind, and sometimes spirit if you really are tuned into that. So let's bounce down here a little bit. So I got, again, I have to have my bullet points in my notes. So here's a couple that you can work with or try even today, like when this video is over, or you can pause it after each one of these descriptions and see which one kind of resonates with you if you'd like. The sway test, when I sway as in like sway to and fro, to me is one of the easiest ones. It's one that I like to use if I'm in the grocery store, or if I'm in like a vitamins section of a store trying to figure something out, and I'm not, like, my mind's saying you need this, but your body is going absolutely not. And this is one way you can work with that, is the sway test. So once you've went through your relaxation, and you can stand or sit, and usually what I find is easier to stand and keep your knees and your hips loose, and keep your back upright, and don't touch anything with your upper body, because that's where you're going to get your movements at. Then you can ask the question of, when you're practicing, show me yes. And a lot of the times, not for everybody, but for me personally, when I do that, my body automatically swings back and forth for yes. And then when you go to use the no, you'll say, show me no. And your body will go the opposite direction, which again, for me, is side to side. The nice thing about this one is you literally can do it anywhere. And you're not doing anything weird. You're literally just taking a deep breath and standing. But then you can hold or touch a food. Do I need this in my diet? Your body will tell you no, or it'll tell you forward and back yes. Is this a vitamin that I need? You can hold the bottle and your body will say no, it'll say yes. And eventually you can start to do this all the time when you just need that little, I'm not really sure if I need this, or I'm not really sure if I want this, and this is a way to speed that up so you can process your body's needs and wants at a little bit better pace. So that one's pretty easy. It's asking what's your body say yes, let it move, say no, let it move, and notice that. And I'm going to say this a couple of times through here just because it's important. When you first start doing these techniques, you want to practice figuring out yes and no consistently. Do it 2 or 3 times a day for about 6 to 7 days so that you really lock in. This is when I ask yes, this is my response to yes. If I ask a question, this is my response to no. It's just a practice so that you can get used to noticing what those answers are. The next one is a little bit less subtle, because you're you're making symbols with your hands, and it's called the ring test, or the ring to ring test. It depends on who you talk to. And I'm not a big fan of this one personally, mainly because I doubt myself too much with it, but I will go over it because these are the common ones. So you'll link your thumb and your index finger like that, so you have rings together. You ask your question, show me yes, and normally yes means you're not going to break, and if it's show me no, you're going to snap them apart. The reason I don't like that is, like I said, it's a mental thing for me, but I know some people, I've had actually a couple of healers that I've went to who use that unbelievably accurately, and it's impressive when you watch them work, because they can ask like 4 or 5 questions and just bam, 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 bam. So it works great. It's just not something I like to do, so that's me. The other one that is kind of one of the common 3. The sway is the easiest to me. The ring test is the next, but this one is one you can work with other people easier. It's the elbow or arm technique. And the elbow technique is where you hold your elbow against the side of your body and you lift your arm up. And it doesn't really matter, in my experience, which arm the person chooses to use. Just bring one up to 90 degrees, so it's sticking straight out from their body. If you're working with another person, you'll take your dominant hand, basically, and you'll place it on their wrist. You'll ask the questions, and then you'll push down. If the arm drops, generally that means the answer is no. But if it holds, the answer generally is yes. Again, practice with what works for you. To do it on yourself, personally, you would take your non-dominant hand. For me, it's my left hand. And so you'd hold that out at that left, the 90-degree angle. You put your right hand, your dominant hand, on top of the wrist. You don't want it on the hand, you want it on the wrist. So you'll put it right about this area. And then you'll just push down when you ask your question, and then you'll push. If it holds, yes. If it drops, and what's interesting when you do this is you'll be consciously trying to hold your arm up, but if the answer is no, it's going to just let go. Because you're not working consciously, you're working subconsciously, and that part of your mind is significantly more powerful than we give it credit for. The other option, if you're working with another person, this one is not one you can really do by yourself. But if you're working with another person, you just have them hold their arms straight out beside them. And when you ask your question, again, this is what I've experienced with yeses and the nos. If it holds when you push down, then it's a yes. If it drops, and sometimes it will drop dramatically on a no. So it's pretty obvious when there's an issue there. So those are kind of the basics of how to perform them. Again, you can take classes on this. There's a bazillion places on the internet you can find information. But this is just kind of a basics to kind of give you an idea of what you're working with and what to look for. Sorry, move my chair. When you're working with this type of work. And it's a lot of fun once you figure out some of the basics of yes and no's. So once you've narrowed down the area of imbalance, so we're just going to move kind of through a mini session. Once you move past the area of imbalance, let's go back to the stomach issue. And you find that, it's not a physical thing. It's not like they're having an acid reflux. It's not specific to what the symptom is. There's something deeper. So as you work through that, you start asking, is this issue in the stomach? You get the yes answer. Is this a medical issue that requires a prescription? Answer is no. So you go through, is this a physical disorder? Answer is no. Is this an emotional disorder? Answer is yes. Is this something aligned with the solar plexus chakra? Answer is yes. Then you can ask, would Reiki help this? The answer is yes or no. Would acupuncture help this? Yes or no. Would acupressure help this? Yes or no. Then you kind of work through the yes and no's, and this can be a very time-consuming process. Once you get used to the answers with muscle testing, it will go pretty quickly because you can start to pick up on the body will respond, especially if you're working on another person. When you ask the question, there's times you won't even have to do the test because the body's responding immediately to what you're saying. And it's subtle things. It's like I said, it's practice is how you're going to develop a lot of this. But once you have done the therapy, Reiki, acupressure, massage, acupuncture, and let it run its cycle, or chakra aligning, things like that, then you test it again to find out if it's still imbalance. Then you can ask, just simple, did this bring the body back into balance? And it'll say yes or no. And if it says no, then you can start going through, is there another area that's out of balance? Then you can start the process over. Again, these are some diagnostic tools that you can add to your cache of tools. There are, like I said, certificates. You can look online and find courses for this. I've learned a lot of it through talking to other healers and working out of books. I'm a book person, so I can kind of visualize and figure a lot of the stuff out through that. Now, the other tool that goes along with muscle testing, this is not to say that they're the same, because in reality, the energy you're working with subconscious mind is different, or is the same, but a pendulum is so much more broad to me than just using it for muscle testing type work. I personally love using pendulums. I have 5 or 6 personal ones. It's a very, very simple tool. It's a weight on the end of a string or a chain with a way to hold the weight at the top. Generally it's a bead, sometimes it's a knot, just depends on what you have around you. Once you start practicing with pendulums more and really work with them, you can literally tie a rock to the end of a string and use that in an emergency if you don't have another way to use it. But I personally like to be a little more intense with that, so I'll go over how I tune mine here in a minute. And when you're working with the pendulum, you'll hold it by the bead end, the smaller end, and you'll ask it. Let's see if we can get this out here where you can see it there. You'll ask it simple questions, yes or no's, always yes or no, true or false, and it will swing forward and back for yes. I'm forcing it right now, so or it'll swing side to side for no. And that's how my answers come up for a pendulum: is forward and back is yes, side to side is no. And that's for me. Some people have different. It's, again, you're going to work with your pendulum, you'll work with your muscle testing and find out what your answers are for you. And once you start to develop that, you can start to use it for the muscle testing as well, and it'll tell you yes, no pretty quickly, or unknown will either spin or it'll just hang dead and won't do anything. If it starts to swing and bounce, whatever you're hitting on is a lot bigger of an issue than what was originally thought. And I've only had that happen a couple of times, and it was because there was a deep-seated issue. So instead of swinging calmly, it'll actually twitch when it's swinging yes or no, or it'll actually jump, and like bounce itself when you ask the question. So be aware that a pendulum will really be talkative once you start to work with them. They get really interesting once you work with them more. If you're working on another person, let's go with using it as an energy diagnosing tool. There we go. You'll have your client lay down. We'll just go with the chakras because they're pretty simple to work with to start with pendulums. So this has been my experience. Some texts go along with this, others do not. Go with what works for you. Again, testing it on yourself to find out what is yes, what is no, or what is healthy and what isn't in the chakra realm. For me, chakras always spin clockwise. So if you had a clock face laying down, it will spin that direction, the positive way, with the clock's time if it's a healthy open chakra. It will spin the other way, and generally it will be slower, or it'll just not move at all with your chakras out of alignment. So when you hold up your pendulum, you can ask the chakra, first of all, is it in balance? And it will usually say yes, or it'll say no. Again, I'm moving it, so it's but if you are working on a client, if you ask, okay, it's out of balance, well, how bad of out of balance is it, or what's the energy flow? And it'll start to spin. Like right now it's clockwise for me. And then if it's out of balance, you can ask what direction is it out of balance, and it will show the opposite. Working with it on yourself or on someone you trust so that you can get positive feedback on working with it. This is a diagnosing tool only. It's just another tool. It doesn't do the healing for you. It's a way for you to understand what that person's going to need. At times, a person cannot tell you what they are looking at. Or if you're working on yourself, you can hold your hand over the chakra, like let's say your third eye. So you put your hand on that, your receptive hand on your chakra, and ask, is this chakra aligned? And it will tell you yes or no, spinning it. Or what do I need? Do I need more meditation time? Yes, no. Do I need to have an alignment? Yes, no. Things like that are ways to diagnose with energy work using a pendulum. So with the pendulum, once you find out what the issue is, then you can go ahead and do the healing. And a really quick way to test it afterwards is just ask that person's chakras, their energy body, however you were working on it, did that fix that cause or that root problem? And generally after, it'll say yes or no. On occasion, it'll just hang dead, and that usually means that whatever's going on is still in the process of clearing out, of realigning, finding balance. So you just let it continue to do its thing and check back later type of a thought. Just my 2 cents. So a little grift here for a second. I actually make pendulums. They're a little bit smaller than a lot of ones you'll find, but they're very potent because inside each one of them there is a Lemurian, if that'll zoom. No? Okay. And this is one that I use for me. But inside each one I have a quartz crystal point, and they are filled with orgone energy, so I actually make orgone pendulums. I'm looking at making some bigger sizes, but right now I just make the smaller ones. And With that, I always send a little card, or whenever you purchase one, you get a little card that allows you to practice at home, just so you can kind of get used to the yeses and the nos. If your pendulum is totally saying the opposite of what I have written down here, that's fine. This is what works for me, and that's why I have it written that way. And a lot of people I know have the same response to a pendulum, so you can work with it that way as well. So how I tune a pendulum is similar to how I work with a new Oracle or Tarot deck when I get it. I like to tune it to me so that it answers to my energy, and then when I use it for somebody else, it can respond to my yeses and my nos using their energy as to what's going on. It's just a way so that you can understand your tool a little bit better. So it's basically you're aligning it to how your body responds to yeses and nos with the pendulum. So how I do that is I like to get whenever I get a new one, I put it in the sun, preferably high noon, for about 30 minutes or so. You don't need to leave it out for too long, mainly because the sun can be really intense with how it works. So you just want to let it kind of clear out any of the stuff from the last person who touched it. I'm not a purist with all of my tools. I have one pendulum that is only mine. No one ever touches it, and I don't use it for anything but me. But like the one I'm using here, I will use it in a session to help figure out what's going on, or someone else can use it just to kind of get their idea when I'm at shows and stuff so they can understand the use. So when you first are doing this, the first little bit, you do not want anyone else touching this. It just needs to align to you, not to your spouse, not to your kids, not to your friend. Oh, look what I just got. You don't want to do that. You need to align with it first. So so once it's in the sun for about 30 minutes, I bring it back indoors, and then I want to charge it in the light of a full moon for the entire night. Sun goes down, pendulum gets hung in the window or laid somewhere where the moon can just be on it all night. Before the sun comes up the next day, get it out of the moonlight so it doesn't get supercharged, basically, and that can actually mess up the flow from the moon. Once you have done the sun and the moon so it's in balance, for the next 7 days, I always keep my new tool next to my bed, because your subconscious, even when you're asleep, will tap into that new tool and work on that aligning, so it really starts to get you connected to your item. So you can get the yeses and the nos clearly and definitively. There's not going to be a lot of questions once you go through the process. So in the daytime, when you're not sleeping, you can go and work with it, practice with it. Practice with it every single day for those first 7 days. If you want to practice longer to really get comfortable with it, you can go as long as 30. Normally, I find that a little unnecessary. Some people advocate for it, so what's comfortable for you, but I do very strongly recommend practicing for 7 days, 2 to 3 times a day if you can. If you only do it once due to time constraints, that's fine too. So once you get ready to practice your first little bit, you want to take and calm yourself. Do the deep belly breathing, bring your attention down into your body, into your heart or your abdomen, or meditate 15-20 minutes so that you're just in a calmer state and you have shut up that monkey mind, that noise that's always running in the background, so it's quiet. So your subconscious mind can talk, which doesn't usually chatter that much, so this is a way to tap that. And once you have got yourself into that calm state, then you can ask your pendulum to show you yes. And observe the movement of the pendulum. Sometimes, and it's been a little while since this has happened with me because I've been using them for almost 20 years, but on occasion I'll get one that really wants to be distant, and it may not say anything for the first 2 or 3 days. Like, will not spin, will not swing, will nothing, just hangs. And it's like, what is going on? Sometimes it needs to be re-cleansed, put it back out in the sun, do the moon cycle again, try it over. Sometimes it's just a moody pendulum, it doesn't want to work. That's fine, because I think we all have those days, right? But ask it again to show you yes, and observe what the answer is. Then tell it to settle or calm, which will trigger in your subconscious mind and in your muscles and in the pendulum that it's time to go back to neutral. So say settle and it drops. And then when you go back to asking it, what is my sign for no? and it will start to sway whatever direction it is for no. For me, it's side to side. And then tell it to settle, and it will drop. Sometimes it takes a little bit to get to those points. Using settle or calm is just a way to bring it down to where it's not moving anymore. But then go back and ask it yes again, and then ask it no, asking it to settle each time, so that you start to get into a pattern of watching the movement and understanding that it will actually respond to what you're asking. There are some people who say that a pendulum runs completely off of subtle movements within your fingers and your body, your blood. There's other people that will tell you that it's strictly your energy field around you. You can, and I don't recommend this, but you can actually start tapping into using a pendulum and having an angel move it or a guide move it. I personally don't like doing that. It's just in my opinion. But that is something that some people work with, and that's why I'm saying with a pendulum it can go a lot further than just figuring out a diagnosing tool. So once you do your yeses and your nos, this is a personal preference. This is what I do with a lot of my stuff. I do the same thing with my decks after any reading, is I always want to say thank you to the tool and then put it away in a respectful manner. If you have the option to, you can take your pendulum, put it in a nice little silk bag, and tuck it away. If it's something that you want to tote with you all the time, then you can just stick it in your pocket. But it's just a way to show respect for the things around you. Spiritual tools, whether it's a Bible, your journal, a pendulum, whatever it is, start to build a charge of spiritual frequency. And if you're giving gratitude when you're working with it, it's going to keep that positive spiritual frequency going. Again, that's my opinion. That's how I view that. So just something to think about when you're working with them. I will have a link in the description below if you want to check out the pendulums that I have. The pictures are kind of blasé, not the greatest picture taker, but I have a lot of colors and a lot of mixed colors in there. So if you want to look through the color pattern, you can message me on my website and just see let me know if there's something you like, dislike. I'm totally cool with that, or you can put it in the comments below the video. That's awesome too. So once you've figured out your yeses and your nos, it's really limitless how far you can go with a pendulum. You can do the same thing with muscle testing. It just takes a little bit more finesse to get used to those type of outside of the healing world. So with that being said, I hope this video showed you some value, gave you something to think about, maybe introduced you to a couple of techniques that you'd never heard of before. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, just drop them in the comment section below, and I will even take any criticism as long as it's done in a respectful manner. I think we all could use more respect in our lives. Go ahead and like and subscribe if you are new to this channel, or if this is a video that you enjoyed. I appreciate all of that, and I will talk to you guys again in the next video, and have an awesome week.